All right. Hello to everyone. Welcome to our week 7 Zoom session. We are going to be looking at engaging with learners and learning. So specifically, we're going to be looking at reflection. So you were asked to read chapter 13 of Teaching Making a Difference and chapter 7 of Learning to Teach in a New Era. So this is, very important that if you haven't had the opportunity to do these readings yet, you need to. You need to make sure that you've developed these understandings, because assessment task 2 is very much around your knowledge of the unit content. So when we're marking it, as with assessment task 1 as well, but definitely with assessment task 2, we want to see you how you've engaged with the unit content. And that will come out in the language that you use, the professional terminology that's evident as well. That shows that you've actually done some reading, and also in things like the references you use, and of course your links to the Australian Professional Standards. But all of that information, you can get that from your textbooks and your weekly readings, which generally come from the textbooks. Any questions? Sorry, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat this morning. Let's get it out. All right. So from the readings, you were asked to respond to each of the questions or prompts, or we could refer to them also as sentence starters. So these were the ones on the slide, and they were on Blackboard. On your pre-workshop PowerPoint. If you haven't completed the readings, you could reflect on the lecture that you would have watched instead. If you haven't completed either of those, no judgment. If you haven't completed either of those, and I ask you to respond, because I'm going to ask you to respond, I'm going to just randomly choose people. Just please say, I'm sorry, I haven't completed it, and I'll move on to the next person. Or you could have a go. You could think about your understandings of reflection and just have a go anyway. But as I keep saying in all of our workshops, it's about having a go and really starting to develop your confidence in talking about your beliefs about practice. So that's a very important part of being a teacher. All right, so we have got this very, very cool online spinner to use for the activity. So when the spinner lands on a particular question, I'm going to ask someone to respond. So to respond based on their reading of the 2 textbook chapters, or it could be from the lecture. So here we go. It's kind of cool, isn't it? Let's hope it works. Whoa! How awesome is that? Okay. Something that I think I might use or take on board. So this would be something that you might take on board in your future practice, so that you've read in one of the textbooks. All right, let's ask Jake. You there, Jake? Remember, if you haven't completed the textbook reading, you can type in the chat, sorry, haven't completed it, that's fine. Excellent, thank you, Jake. No worries at all. Okay, Annika. You there, Annika? Just a little response would be good. Just unmute your mic and just say so. That would be a good way to go. All right, what about Angela? Angela Greer?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
Sorry.
So in learning to teach in a new era, something I might use was when reading a story, include diverse characters as a regular part of the story and not as tokenism.
Oh,
That
I
makes sense.
like that. Yeah. So it's just something, you know, even one little thing that you noted. That's all I'm asking you to share. Okay, shall we have another spin? Here we go. A comment I would like to make. What's a comment that you would like to make? Sorry, I'm having trouble reading upside down. Nikki, any thoughts?
I actually struggled with the comment I would like to make for either of the textbooks.
Okay, so unfortunately, wait on. Okay, something that pushed your buttons.
Oh no, that was another one that I was like,
okay.
I was like, okay, those ones, I don't
All
think
right.
you can push my buttons, but I
All
find
right.
it interesting.
The section or point or quote that had the greatest impact on you.
I really like the quote by Ginnott. I think it's Ginnott.
Yes.
It's about how powerful he is as a teacher and how much, they can make or break students' lives, basically,
Yes.
enjoyment. Yeah.
No, I agree. I have to say, I would have said the same thing because I that quote is pretty cool. I think, you know, I often reflect on how much power teachers have, like the classroom teacher in their learning environment, every decision that they make, their language, the way they interact with the students, everything has such an impact in every way. Okay. Thanks very much, Nikki. The section or point or quote that had the greatest impact on me. Let's actually ask someone else about that one. Okay. Kevin, any thoughts? Which section or quote had the greatest impact on you? Be a particular point?
The diversity one.
Yeah. So what is it about diversity that you think is really significant?
It's like so your children can be have how you say that everyone was different. They will have a different cultural background and like or the skin colors. So as a teacher, you can't you need to treat them same. You can't like do some yeah.
Yeah, good. Excellent. So, you know, diversity is all about observing those diverse learners in your environment and making sure that they all feel included, that you take their individual needs into account. So, yeah. And diversity, Kevin, is something that we're going to talk in depth about next week as well. And it's also going to be the basis of your first case study. So the reflection, the first reflection that you're going to do. All right, let's do one more. Something that I think I might take on board. So something for your professional practice. So something that you read that you think you might actually use in professional practice or even in your placement. Benjamin, have you got anything that you would like to share?
Yes, I read chapter 13 of Teaching Making a Difference, and something that I'm going to probably use is the technologies they're referred to, like journals, audio and video recordings, blogs, for reflective activities. And also you can include your peers, friends, and students. Yeah. So which is a great way of including professional learning communities.
Definitely. Excellent. I like that a lot. Thank you. All right, so I want you to think now about, so we've got 2 questions on the slide. This is where we really think about and unpack the purposeful and thoughtful teaching strategies teachers use. So specifically, I want you to think about the activity we just completed. So you were given prompts or sentence starters to reflect on as you were reading. So when you were reading the textbooks, you had those prompts there that you could refer to when you were reading. So how do you think this might support learners by having those prompts or sentence starters? Any thoughts?
Well, hello. They act as like a guidance on what to look for, like the specifics rather than the whole text itself.
Yeah, so you can focus on something. I really like that. I think it's a great way to be able to think more in depth about a specific focus rather than covering everything generally. Anyone else that would like to add anything?
For me, it was also good because I tend to just pick out what sticks out to me from a textbook. But when you do ask the other questions, it makes me think about those questions, which I normally wouldn't. So, yeah.
Good. So this is a really good strategy you can use with your students, just to encourage them to focus on one specific area, because we have so much information coming at us, and, you know, reading 2 chapters, it can feel overwhelming. But if you know what to particularly look out for, even if you were to just focus on 1 or 2 of those questions, it would give you a specific focus. And what about the spinner? Why do you think I used the spinner? Other than it being really cool. Any thoughts? I think in terms of early childhood, primary or secondary students, using these kind of online devices, they're good hooks. You know, they're novel, I think, and it's important, and it's colourful as well. It really engages them and gets their attention. I think it also was good in that it encourages everyone to get involved. I adapted the task. So originally the task was to respond to the textbook chapters, but I assumed that some of you may not have got around to reading the textbook chapters, so I extended that out to the lecture as well. But I guess some of the drawbacks with any of these things is, you know, there are students that didn't have the opportunity to read the textbook chapters, so that is limiting in some ways. Now, I just want to make sure that, I'm wondering really, if you're still using the notes taking template and using your teaching strategies companion. Has anyone been using that, the teaching strategies companion? I just want to reiterate that it is a really good tool in terms of getting ideas, strategies, understandings, and insights down for your first professional experience. So it, you know, if you've got it written down there and in those particular headings, when it comes to having to do a plan or a reflection or an observation, it just makes it so much easier. And it's also a good study guide as well. Okay, and as it says there, you might even consider another heading. So online teaching and learning, or multimodal teaching and learning. Okay, so in our pre-workshop preparation slide, you watched a clip with some insights from our QUT graduates. So this was into supporting diverse learners. And as I said, we're going to expand on this even further next week and introduce our first case study. So I asked you to fill out a Y chart. So the provocation, the clip, it was designed to get you to consider, who might the diverse learners be in your teaching environment, and what might that environment look like in how you respond to diversity. So when you completed the Y chart, what really resonated with you, thinking of yourself as a pre-service teacher going into your placements? So what did you put in your Y chart? You can type it into the chat if you don't want to verbalize, or you can just say it. So what did we put in sound like? What do you think an environment that caters for diversity might look like? Check in the chat. Nope. Okay. These are some of the things that I pulled out of the clip. But then, as instructed, I went a bit further and thought also about what came out of the textbook readings. So supportive and positive interactions, that's the kind of thing that you would be looking for in an environment that supports diverse learners. So you would hear a use of varied languages, dialects. It would be busy. It would be warm and caring. There would be time to reflect and to get to know students. So this does take time. In a busy day, you actually need to make sure that you have those opportunities and the strategies to really get to know the diversity of your students. It could feel quite overwhelming, especially as a beginning teacher or a teacher out on placement. You would really need to observe carefully how your supervising teacher caters for individual students. So I think the term diversity can be used very loosely. I think if we really think about it, every student is diverse in some way. Would you agree? It's, everyone has specific challenges or strengths or needs. Benjamin says that there would be a use of mixed devices, so PowerPoint, laptops, and also teacher explaining concepts on the board. Excellent. So you would need to use multimodal things to cater for a variety of learning needs and ways of learning as well. That's a great one, Ben. Thank you. It would be exhausting, possibly. I think some of the beginning teachers in the clip did find it a bit overwhelming and exhausting. You would need empathy and patience as well for individual learners. Resilience, I think that's something that you would really need to have in working in an environment with many diverse learners. So ranges of learners in the learning environment. Okay. Respectful. And reflecting the life stories of the students as well. I think this is a really, really important one, because it's very much about catering for cultural and language diversity, but we're also thinking about social economic diversity. We're thinking about diversity in family structure. So that would involve working with blended families. It could be single parent families, families with two mums or two dads, so gender diverse families, families where grandparents may be the carers, could be foster families. You might be catering for immigrant and refugee families as well. So this could possibly be where there may be trauma involved. You're also going to be thinking about students with challenging behaviours, children and students who are gifted, or children and students that may have a disability. So, you know, I think overwhelming and exhausting and resilient might be three big factors here that we need to consider. Anything else? When I was reading through the chapters, I was actually thinking about how important it is developing those family partnerships and getting parents involved. I think it's really central to building trust and communication and encouraging families to feel part of the culture as well. When I was teaching very early on in my career, I was in a long day childcare centre, and it was in an area in Brisbane where there were a lot of migrant families. And we actually used to do home visits. On quite a few occasions, I went over and had lunch with some of the families, which was a really wonderful opportunity. I was invited into the family's home, and it really created that bridge between home and school. And it involved differentiating for those individual students, especially those ones that were having difficulty settling into their environment. And this can be extended to up more older grades as well. So one of the students also in the clip mentioned ICP, so individual curriculum plans. So this involves differentiating for those strengths and needs of individual students. And it involves adjusting your planning, and it also might involve working with specialists. So you know, you might need to work with specialists to make sure that the strategies that you're using are consistent between home and school. This might involve liaising with speech therapists or with psychologists, with caseworkers or support workers as well. And of course, it might lead to the need to do some professional development to support some specific new skills that you might need to develop to assist individual students as well. So supporting and assisting diverse learners, it can be quite complex, and you know, we really need to focus on making sure that our environments are respectful and they our resources present. Let me try that again. Our resources cater for a variety of students as well, and that could also be thinking about the layout of the environment as well. You might need to adapt that for individual students also. So you were asked to watch a second clip. This next provocation was asking you to step into the shoes of the pre-service teacher. So we used this clip as an observation tool last week, so you should be familiar with it as well. So this particular activity was designed to scaffold your learning in preparation for your second assessment task, which I outlined in the lecture. So you had to choose a focus or an aspect or a critical incident and reflect on it. So responding to the two stages of the reflection process, the first two stages. So reflect and respond and relate. So we're breaking down the task. We're just looking at the first two at the moment. So the aspect needed to be something that you could personally respond to. And that's really important when you're thinking about a critical incident for your assessment task. I think having something that you can personally respond to, or possibly, or also you might have some prior experience, you might have some prior knowledge or understanding about the area as well. So I gave you 3 examples that you could have considered. The first one was your response to the teacher's use of questioning. So questioning to engage learners and to assist their comprehension. The second one that I suggested could have been your response to being observed in a learning environment as a pre-service teacher. And the third one, knowing curriculum content and how to teach it. There were so many others that you could have also chosen as well. Which one did you actually choose? Who would like to share first? So when you were observing the clip, what was the particular incident that you chose to reflect on? Anyone? Yeah? Nikki?
I was just about to say, I actually must have completely missed this because I did all the other things about printing out and the reflections and doing the reading, and I didn't even look at a Zoom. Sorry, I didn't even know that I had to. I must have missed it somewhere.
Okay, so there's your preparation PowerPoint. Is that the one that you're meaning?
Yeah, I didn't even see that. I don't know why, but I'll have a look.
Yeah, so each week you have to do your preparation PowerPoint before you come to the Zoom session. So that sets you up for the learning. So then we can just go in and discuss and unpack the knowledge that you're developing. Angela, did you get a chance to have a look?
I was just going to say the same thing. Sorry. I realized that I had to do the PowerPoint this morning and I didn't get a chance to do this particular one. Sorry.
That's fine. Molly, you did the questioning one? Oh,
yeah, I did the first one that you said about how she uses questions to like test their comprehension and if they understand or not.
Okay. All right. Did anyone do this clip? Watch this clip and choose an incident?
Yeah, I did.
Excellent, Matthew. You're a lifesaver. Thank you, darling. Okay. Which did you choose?
So similar with the questioning part, I decided to focus on the particular aspect I noticed is that she used one style of questioning but expected a response in another style of questioning.
Excellent.
So she was asking very closed questions, but wanting or appeared to want to receive open answers.
That's a really good observation. Excellent. And you know what's really good? It's a very specific focus. And it's also a focus that, have you had any prior experience with questioning, or possibly the way your teachers use questioning when you were in school?
Yeah, I noticed this exact same thing. And like I've been out of school for a while, but even in learning and development situations in corporate environments,
yeah,
I've noticed the exact same thing. There's definitely a point in where the teachers or the L&D guys want to get to, but sometimes the questions they're using just aren't really set up to get that final answer. So people seem a little bit confused in what exactly to say because they want to say the right answer more than anything else.
Yeah. So something that's a bit more open-ended, perhaps. Yeah, I like that. Very good. So if we have a look at our stages, so at the first one, at this stage, you describe, report, or retell the critical incident, which is what you have just done, Matthew. This could relate to what you've learned, seen, experienced, or reacted to. So this is about your response to the issue. It may take the form of feelings, questions. It helps to narrow to one aspect, exactly as you did, Matthew. And if the reflection is too broad, it's very difficult to then move on and complete the next stage. So the second part, relating, you would identify aspects of the observation which have a personal meaning. So this might be connections to your own strengths. So Matthew, have you had any experience, do you believe that you have skills in understanding different forms of questioning?
Very, very beginners skills, I'd say, at this stage. I've done some teaching in a corporate environment, but it was very much, you know, up to me and how to deliver it. So I haven't really had the opportunity to develop outside of what I'd already do.
Okay, so you might want to say something like, although I've had experience in developing questioning skills in my professional life previously, in terms of catering for the needs of individual students, I think I need to really consider the different types of questioning that I can use. And so here you're identifying something that you need to plan or to change. So as you can see, each stage, it's like a checklist. So basically, you just need to follow the checklist. Any questions at this point about the framework? I broke it down in the lecture. So went through step by step, and we're going to do a lot of this in the workshops. I'm going to do it further. We're going to do it, break down another particular focus and unpack the assessment task in more detail, because I really want you to be able to understand exactly what the assessment task is. Okay. So I've actually preempted that maybe you hadn't done the task. And I watched the clip and I actually thought about it from the perspective of a pre-service teacher. So I imagine myself as you guys, and I reflected back on my first placements, or even prior to my first placements when I started teaching, like we're talking 30 years ago here. I had to really think very hard. So I actually remember really freaking out about being observed. It was something that I felt really quite uncomfortable with. I really hated the idea of my every single move being judged. And I was quite nervous about it. You know, I was, you know, early 20s, still lived at home. I hadn't had a lot of experience in the world. So it was, you know, a bit scary. So when I actually wrote my reflection, I noted the critical incident that I had identified, the incident from the observation that I thought was really important to me. And so my personal perspective. I also posed some questions to address as a result of this initial reflection or reaction that I'd had to the observation. So this is what I wrote. So after watching the recording of the pre-service teacher teaching a year 10 maths class, so I've actually noted what the stimulus was. So this was the observation. In the case of your assessment task, you would be noting the case study. So you've got 3 case studies. So you would say, after reading through the case study of the blah, 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 it made me wonder. And I think this is a really nice way to start, because reflecting is about wondering. Observation is about what we see and what we hear, but reflection, it's about wondering, and especially using the 4 R's, because it's starting in the first 2 sections with your personal response. So it made me wonder how I feel about being observed during my placement. The student teacher in the recording looked calm and confident and seemed very prepared. She had good control of the class and was able to engage the students. What if the students misbehaved and I couldn't control them? What if I froze and made a fool of myself? I'm worried that I wouldn't make the right decisions and the supervising teacher would fail me. So if we have a look back to those, to our framework, this is pretty much what it's telling us to do. Reported what happened or what the issue was, explained why it's relevant, responded to the incident or issue by making observations. So I've sort of said what it is that I observed that's important, and then pose questions to address as a result of the incident. So again, very much what Matthew shared in his reflection. Any questions at this point? If we're going through this and you don't understand, I want you to ask a question, because it may just mean that I need to explain it or clarify it in a different way. So it's not that you're stupid or your question's dumb. It's just that you might need me to explain it in a different way. I actually, in the face-to-face class, we had a little bit of difficulty relaying what you actually had to do, because this process of reflecting, it can actually be a bit complex. This is one of the more, if you can believe it, this is one of the more simple reflection frameworks. Some of them are much more complicated than this. So I really want to take you through step by step. All right, so the second one, relate, then I related to it personally. So this is about you. So related personally to my connections from my past experiences and also my understandings as well. And it's about considering, as Matthew did, your strengths and your weaknesses. And I also identified something that I might need to change based on this particular weakness. So being observed and evaluated is not something I've had past experience with. I wonder if I have the skills or knowledge to differentiate for individual students and make purposeful and thoughtful decisions. From what my lecturer has said, as a graduate pre-service teacher, my supervising teacher is there to support me, not to criticize, and to encourage me to try new things and not be afraid to make mistakes. Maybe I need to adjust my mindset and see my mistakes as a learning experience. So can you see where I'm coming from or going to? This is quite a negative take. So you might have had a completely different prior experience, and you may have had more strengths than weaknesses. You may actually be quite excited about going in and being observed. You may have a growth mindset already, as opposed to my mindset that was considerably lacking as a young person. I actually couldn't see my strengths. I only saw my weaknesses. So this is the report and the relate, and then moving into the next particular focus, where we need to make some links to theory. I'd probably then start talking about mindsets, and I'd be referring to the research of Carol Dweck and other researchers as well to get some multiple perspectives. So this is just the first two stages. So does anyone have any questions at this point?
So I just wanted to ask, you know how you're making improvements, like suggestions for the future in your relate section? Would you use those same suggestions in your reconstruct section?
Okay, so this is where I'm setting up. So this last sentence, maybe I need to adjust my mindset and see mistakes as a learning experience. So this is where I'm setting up for the next one. So really good writing, good paragraphing, as you would know from school, using your Peel paragraphs. You know, you would have an introductory sentence and then sentences to break down, then you would possibly have evidence and then a conclusion. But here, this is where I'm doing my linking sentence onto the next one. So we're going to, in our next activity, actually break down the other sections as well. And you'll see how we're, excuse me, moving on to unpack that further. A very good question, Angela. So you're preempting the next stage. Well done. Starting to see those links. Any other questions? Okay, so our in your pre-workshop activity, the final provocation was an audio recording this time, mixing it up a bit with the different ways of presenting the provocations and stimulus. So this was of Alex, a pre-service teacher who was stepping into a placement for the very first time. So this is when he first walked in to the classroom. I asked you to listen to the recording and reflect and imagine yourself in that particular situation, and to think about some of the critical incidences, some of the things that made you wonder. And keep coming back to that phrase. This made me wonder. I think that's a really good terminology to use. So we're going to use this observation, this audio recording, as an example to have another go at responding to a specific identified incident using the 4R reflection model. And so we're going to do it using all of the 4 R's this time. So again, oh, sorry, go on. A question? No? Okay. So again, I preempted that some of you may not have had the opportunity to listen to the recording. So I've actually got a transcript here of the recording. So this is for those of you who have listened to it, it's to refresh your memories. And for those of you who didn't get the opportunity, it's to have a first go. So have a read through of it. I want you to think about critical incidences, things that are really important that jump out at you. So jot down some points as you go. Give me a thumbs up on the chat when you've finished. You might want to take some dot points. I'll give you some time. I'm assuming that those of you who are listening to the recording at home are doing the same thing. This is all practice for your second assessment task. So a thumbs up when you're finished. Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Molly. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Joey. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Nikki. So a few more moments. Okay. So what were some examples of key issues or incidences that you pulled out of the transcript?
The main one that stood out to me was how the children left their hands up for a really long time and that she kept focused on the task and didn't address their issues or ideas.
Good one. Anyone else?
I can go. I noticed a few things. Something how she used gendered feedback when the talking to the students, like she said, "Oh, good girl," whatever, and how that would affect diverse learning, sort of. Noticed her behavior management and how she split students in corners and like didn't have them focusing on the task. They all looked away at the wall, and I thought how that would also affect engagement and if it was an effective strategy sort of thing.
Beautiful, Molly. Really good. Some other things?
I couldn't get past the no smiling until Easter.
I was going to say that. I know.
I just couldn't see anything else but that.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one to focus on. Yeah. So what do you think? What would you unpack in regards to that? Why did that make you wonder?
I thought about body language, word choices, and I guess also wondering where she got that idea from. So was that something she'd found in literature, or is that something that's just been talked about in offices? I just wonder where that came from and whether it's true or not.
Why do you think she would think that that would be effective?
Honestly, it sounds like just a catchy phrase, right?
Yeah.
Like I think good marketing is probably the most important thing there.
Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Why would she say, "Don't smile until Easter"? That was it, wasn't it? Yeah. Why would she say that to him as advice? I think that it is not getting too close to students, keeping that professional distance so that they respect you, maybe, so that in some way there's fear, they're scared of you, so that children won't muck up. That clearly didn't work. The children in the corner were smirking. But I think, instead of using your body language, your phrasing, all of those things, smiling, all of those sorts of things to in some way encourage respect and to encourage students to feel comfortable in the learning environment, to feel like they have a voice, all of those things. I think that's really important. Developing relationships, well, it's part of the professional standards, but it's also part of human nature, really. I think, if you don't have that connection with someone, how can how can you trust them or feel like you can they can teach you? So we actually there were quite a few points there. Some of the ones that I thought about here, And I also added use of ability grouping as well. When I listened through it again, I missed that. At the end, I don't know if you noticed that she said, he said that she told him about all of the ability groups. So have a read through those. So basically, what we're doing is pulling out key incidences, pulling out things that are significant to you that made you wonder. And that's what you're going to be doing in the case studies as well. So there are 3 case studies that you will have to read through. Some of them are very long and detailed, so you really need to look at them. Some even have resources attached as well. So you need to make sure that you have a good understanding of it before you unpack a very narrow focus. So as you can see, these are very narrow. So what I want to do is I've actually chosen what if I don't agree with my supervising teacher as one. So I think this is actually no. Let's instead let's do what forms. Let's talk about feedback. So gendered feedback. I think that's a really important one because I'm thinking from the point of view of something more in practice, because we've already talked about something in terms of something like that. So let's talk about practice. All right, so I want you to have a look. I want you to think about let's think about what your thoughts are on using the terms good boy and good girl. We can see there where she's actually said this, but if we're thinking about the use of good boy and good girl and the kind of style of feedback, what are your thoughts about that?
You shouldn't label the child, you should label the behaviour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good, good, excellent. I like that. So, we want to describe the particular incident. So you observed your supervising teacher using some approaches, or we would say in the observation, I observed that the supervising teacher used some approaches that I questioned based on my beliefs about practice, my beliefs and understanding about practice. So specifically her use of gendered feedback in using the phrasing good boy or good girl. So you'd report this, describe what was observed and how you reacted to it. So I guess like Nikki, my reaction was how she focused on the student, not on the work or the behaviour. I would question, should we be praising the work or the student? So some of you, like Molly, may have reacted to the use of boy or girl. Was it you, Molly, that said that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you might question, does this encourage gender bias in the learning environment, as you suggested? So there are many directions that you could go in, but I would stick to one particular focus. So you could use gender bias, or you could actually use feedback. Let's focus on the feedback side of things. So as you can see, I've even narrowed down it even more. So the more specific it is, the easier it's going to be to pull in your own particular experiences, your prior knowledge, and then make links to theory. So we identify where the incident came from. So Alex's observation. And we raised specifically what it involved. So our critical incident, what it involved, and that was the use of feedback. And then we raised a relevant question. So should we be praising the work or the student? So they're the three main things that we've focused on in that section. So if we have a look here, so we described, report, or retold the critical incident or key issue. You may also ask questions or express opinions or feelings at this point and justify why you think this is a critical incident. So that one important issue, that's really what I want you to be focusing on in your reflection. Any questions at this point about reporting and responding? All right, now we move on to relating. So this is about where we really connect to ourselves. It identifies your personal and also, where applicable, your professional connection to the incident, like Matthew did. He referred back to what he did in work previously, or it might be referring back to your schooling, or it could be something to do with friends or anything. So it's about that personal connection, prior knowledges or knowledge or experiences with the incident. So I might respond by saying, I've come across this in many learning environments in my experience, not just teachers, but also parents as well. I remember my parents used to focus very much on that. I had a brother and it was always good boy, good girl, never specifically about why we were good, or bad boy, bad girl, or wooden spoon. So, you know, it's very much focusing on a specific area of feedback. So yeah, my initial reaction or concern was to question the usefulness of this feedback. It would provide a brief moment of joy for the student, but what benefit would it have to their learning? So I'm asking more questions, and that's good. Questions are good because that helps us bring in more depth. And then in the later stages, these are the questions that you're going to answer. So from what I learned at uni, you could say it's best to provide targeted feedback. Anything else to add at all in terms of feedback? Any particular experiences with feedback that you might include in this? So it says here that very much this is about using first person. So this is an occasion where first person is necessary. Questions? Okay, so reasoning, this is where we make those important connections to theory. So how do some of the issues raised in the observation connect to key learning from the unit? So from your textbook, from unit readings, from other scholarly literature and research, but I would focus first on unit readings. So I'm marking it, I'd be looking at seeing how you've discussed the unit content and then possibly beyond. You might also connect with relevant policy documents as well, or ethics documents. I would identify important issues and then support them with scholarly sources. So every statement that you make that isn't your own, that isn't a reflection, personal reflection, you would use a reference. So in this case, I might identify the research of Hattie and Timperley, who suggests we focus on the task, not the learner. So to give timely, unbiased, and I guess importantly, objective feedback. And they also talked about promoting goal setting, using specific strategies. So you talk about that. And I would also refer to some other research as well. So another perspective to get a varied viewpoint. I think that's important. And very importantly, you would be referring to the Australian Professional Standards. So at this point in the reflection in stage 3. So what standard do you reckon we'd be referring to? Have a quick look. Have a look at your standards. .2, yeah, 6.2, yeah. So very much assess and provide feedback and report on student learning. That would probably be the most important one that, you know, standard 5 that you would be doing. And Angela, good, yep, 6.2, 5.2, yeah, I thought you did. All right. So any questions about this particular section? And then the final one, reconstruct. So this is very important. This is the most important section, I think. This is where you're connecting to your future practice. So when you're out on placement, when you're doing your reflections, this is pretty much what you're going to do. This is not in this depth, but this is the structure, the way that you would actually be thinking. And what we're looking at is reflecting on the next steps in your teaching and learning. So out on placement, what are you going to do next? So you have a lesson plan, you've tried something, it didn't quite work, you've thought about other strategies that you may have read about in your textbook, and you've made some decisions, you've got some new knowledge. Okay, what do we do next? So making those connections to future practice. So I might state, in this situation, from your perspective, that in my placement, I would take these theoretical understandings into consideration in my lesson plans, that I will focus on timely and targeted feedback, possibly that I'll also observe my supervising teacher, their approaches to giving feedback, and reflect on that effectiveness further, and then try using it in my planning, and of course reflecting again. In your 500-word assessment task, so each one is 500 words, so 3 500 words each, you would actually break down the strategies. So we want depth, so break it down even further, suggesting specific strategies that you've read about in the scholarly literature. And you would reference them in text and in your reference list using APA. So this section needs to be quite detailed. This is where and you would refer back to theory as well. So how the theory supports these particular ideas, but going into more depth. Any questions? Nothing on the chat? Nothing yet? No questions? Okay, so I've got, I want to break down the task sheet a little bit further. Hopefully you've all had the opportunity to look at it. Might have it in front of you even. That would be really helpful. So what we've gone through is basically what you need to do for each of the case studies in your assessment task. So you need to choose a critical incident from each one and respond to it using the 4 R's. So that kind of language that I used in that first part, where you would introduce the case study and then talk about it made you wonder, that kind of thing is probably a good way to start. So the case studies, they actually relate to what we'll be doing, what we'll be learning in class. So you would need to make sure your critical incident is related to that particular topic. So the 3 case studies, they each focus on a different area. The first one, learner diversity, which we'll be doing next week. The second one, pedagogy. The third one, curriculum. So in your reflection, your understandings of these areas should be evident. So the first case study, as I said, around diversity in week 8, the second around pedagogy in week 10, and the third curriculum in week 12. So each reflection is 500 words. You could use headings if you wanted to for each one. That's not completely necessary, but I would at least use separate paragraphs. And then depending on the length of the paragraphs and what you've got in them, of course, making sure you use good paragraphing structure, you might want to break down that section into further smaller paragraphs as well. I think in marking some of the assessment tasks, this is something that was quite lacking, I noticed, with some writing, that, you know, use of paragraphs, the old Peel paragraph structuring, making sure that each paragraph has a particular focus. But this will be very clear. So, you know, you would be breaking that each section down. So the 3 case studies, they're already available on Blackboard in the Assessment 2 folder. You can go through them anytime at all. They're quite in depth, as I said, and they're all very different in the way that they're presented. So I would go through and start thinking about a critical incident or focus, remembering that you need to focus on those 3 areas, learner diversity, pedagogy, and curriculum in each of the case studies are actually about. As I noted in my lecture, and it's also noted in the task sheet as well, that we advise you to do your reflection in the week that it's introduced. So next week in week 8, you would start writing that reflection. Don't leave them all till the last minute. Please don't do that, because it'll just be overwhelming. Get them down each week or each fortnight.
Ask.
Yeah.
What is I was just looking at in those case studies. For case study 1, is that just reading the textbook and discovering one? I just couldn't see one for that one. It was obvious in the next 2 about the case study. It was in a PowerPoint for the second one. And it was in videos for the third, but for the first one, I just wasn't sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very good question, Nikki, as always. So the first case study, next week, we have some actual real life teachers coming in, and they're going to talk about student diversity. So you would be choosing, and would also from the textbook readings as well. So from reading the textbook readings and listening to those presentations, the guest lecturers for next week, you would choose a critical incident. So something that they said that made you wonder. Yeah. And that will be, yeah. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah, excellent. The way it's worded, Nikki, did you find that difficult to understand? Does it actually note in that case study about the guest lecturers?
It did say it, but then when I saw the other ones, it was like, this is the case study in the PowerPoint and watch these videos for it. So I just wasn't sure.
So the designers of the assessment task have obviously wanted to mix it up. So each provocation would be very different. I think one of them's a script. So they're very, very different stimulus for you to think about. Good question. The scholarly literature that you refer to, this can be sourced, as I said, from unit material. So that would be from within your textbooks. So I wouldn't be just citing the textbook. If you wanted to get a really good grade, I would be looking at research from within the textbook that supports your statements that you're talking about in that stage 3, and then following up with strategies in stage 4. So very much looking at, scholarly research and material from within your textbooks, and also any particular readings that we have as well. So in lectures and workshops. At the end of the slides in the lectures, some weeks you'll see relevant references that you might want to refer to. You might want to look at and refer to as well. It might give you extra information. Of course, you can go beyond this as well if you want. If you find a particular study or research, a journal article that you find is particularly relevant and it's recent, then by all means use that as well. And as discussed earlier, you would need to make those important links to the Australian Professional Standards in stage 3 of the reflection. And, by all means, refer to policy documents and things as well. It will be dependent on what your particular focus is on. Now, also in the task sheet, it doesn't actually state how many references to use. So this is up to you, and this will depend on how in depth you go. Obviously, you would need to reference all statements that aren't your own. And I would use a variety of references as well. Any questions? All right, now on the slide, you can see the criteria sheet. So it's really important that with all your assessment tasks, that you have a good look at the criteria sheet as well. So as you can see here, each criteria is worth a certain number of marks. So 10 for the first, 10 for the second, 10 for the third, and 15 for the fourth. So what does that tell you? Anyone? More detail. Thank you, Molly. So well, these need to be detailed as well, but this one, because it's worth more, it means that you really need to talk about those strategies in quite a lot of depth. So let's have a read through. The reflections focus on a targeted issue related to learners, pedagogy, and curriculum. So not all 3 in each one. One will be about learners, like related to learner diversity. One will be about pedagogy, and one will be about curriculum. Sophisticated and concise explanation of relevance. Reflections are consistently supported by insightful inferences such as questions or opinion statements, so what we sort of talked about. The reflection has made a sophisticated connection between the incident and or issue and own skills or knowledge about teaching, learning, or young people. The reflection clearly makes reference to how it connects to your beliefs, learning, or life experiences. So with a strong focus on how this impacts you as a beginning teacher. So that's what you're referring to. You're reflecting on the fact that you are a beginning teacher, and how, as a beginning teacher, what these case studies are making you wonder. Reasoning reflections have highlighted factors that underlie the incident or issue, sophisticated explanation as to why the issue is important, and draws upon relevant standards, theory, and literature to support reasoning. The reflection considers different perspectives, knowledge, and experiences. So this is where I said, bring in different references, different research, and also make links to put, relevant policy documents as well. Reconstruction reflections have a sophisticated link to future teaching practice, including specific and well-targeted strategies or practices. For instance, elaborate on what might work and why. So this is where, this is up in the distinction or high distinction. So you really go into the what, identifying why. So with different options and different scenarios, and hypothesize possible outcomes, and explained how relevant literature supports your ideas. So that is more sophisticated. So if we have a look down here, we've got reflections have a clear link to future teaching practice. For instance, describe how you would deal with similar situation, explained how relevant literature supports your ideas. So there's a big jump there. Don't even want to look at that one. Okay. Any questions on, of course, written expression, writing conventions, and referencing? So your marker will, if you didn't do very well in your first assessment task, we would definitely be expecting much higher quality this time around with your referencing. Your markers would have given you feedback, and you would need to go back to SiteWrite and check out what you did wrong. Any questions?
I was just going to ask for the like the reasoning section. You know how you've said like it's good to have like differentiating theories, like say for the feedback, gendered feedback example we did, like you'd have obviously theories that say it's like not a good idea to use gendered feedback because this doesn't help like students feel like understand or whatever. Are you saying we should also use feedback that like opposes that idea as well? Theories? No?
So when we're saying different perspectives, it may be looking at, they might have the same, the study might have the same outcome, but they might have brought in different strategies or reasonings as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an argument saying, this is what one theorist says and this is what another theorist says. It could be in agreement, but you would just be sharing different ideas, or even saying this is agreed, such and such agreed that this was the case in their study, blah blah blah.
Okay, cool.
Good question, Molly. Very good.
Thank you.
Anything else? Well, that's pretty much the end of our workshop today. What I want you to really do now is to have a really good look at the assessment task sheet. And this is for those of you at home as well. I would have a look at the case studies. If you've got questions, we're going to, talk in more depth about them in each of those weeks, weeks 8, weeks 10, and weeks 12. But if you have specific questions about the assessment task, you can email your tutor. So for those of you studying externally, that would be me. And for those of you who are watching the recording, and our internal, that would be your internal tutor. Any questions?
Hi, sorry, I just had a question about the assessment.
Yeah.
When we discuss the 4 Rs for the reflections, do we have to talk about all 4 in each reflection, or do we just have to maybe like refer to a couple in each?
Okay. So as you can see, thanks, Jake, for your question. As you can see, the criteria 10, 10, 10, 15. So this is for each of your reflections. So you need to do 3 500-word reflections. Each reflection has to follow the 4R framework.
Right, sorry, you're right, that makes sense.
No, that's good. No, it's good. Really good question. I want to, anything at all, any questions at all, I want to make sure that you have a very good understanding.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So I think in terms of grading, what we would be doing is what we did last year is grade you for each particular case study and then average it out. So that would be what we would be doing. I haven't discussed this with Mia yet, but that's what we did last year. Seems logical, doesn't it? And then it would be a grade overall for your written expression, writing and referencing. Okay, if we don't have any more thoughts, I am going to stop the recording. So those of you watching the recording at home, please make sure you email your tutor with any questions that you may have, or check the Padlet. You can enter questions on the Padlet as well. Making sure though that the Padlet has been made available, but make sure that you read the task and criteria sheet carefully and the Padlet carefully before posting questions. And also referencing questions, make sure you use SiteWrite, referring to any of the referencing questions. You can look at SiteWrite and find out everything that you need to know. Thank you, everyone.